when you are one of those people who likes to do the old virtue signalling, what you want to do is to make sure that you live in a very, very inclusive world. You want to make sure that children basically are taught all manner of particular different types of lifestyles in order for them to become inclusive, in order for them to understand what it is that being in a community of all sorts of different types of people, different colours of people, different shades of people, different religious beliefs of people. You basically want to teach them that everybody is the same. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. However, in my view, there are certain things that you teach at certain ages and certain things that you don't teach at certain other ages. For example, if you are in a primary school with children who are aged between 4 and 11, it's probably not the greatest idea to introduce words like homophobia, to introduce words like transgender, to introduce words like same-sex marriage, because when you're 4 or 5 or 6 years of age, it may not be quite the appropriate thing to talk about. They've got all sorts of problems at that age. They've got all sorts of things that they want to learn at that age. They've got all sorts of social aspects of their life that they are learning because they're mingling with one another. The bottom line for me is that as a parent, I would feel as though it was a bit inappropriate to start teaching 4 and 5-year-olds about transgender lifestyles and about homosexual lifestyles as well, to be honest. Not because there's anything wrong with either of those lifestyles, but because there are certain things that you just don't teach kids, in the same way that I would not teach them about the dangers of drugs at the age of 4. In the same way, I would not teach them about the dangers of contracting a sexually transmitted disease at the age of 4. For the same reason, I wouldn't tell them about all sorts of things which might frighten them at the age of 4. The problem is, right, they're in a school called the Parkfield Community School in a place called Saltley in Birmingham. There's all kinds of shenanigans going on, not least because nobody can actually work out what it is that they should be teaching school children. Now, if you're running a school, surely you're supposed to be an expert in running a school. If you are Parkfield Community School, surely you should know that if you have a very large contingent of Muslim children, and there are 600 of them in this particular school, with Muslim parents who have got family values which are maybe slightly more conservative than the ones that you're going to espouse to their kids, it's going to be very, very difficult and very tricky if you start giving lessons about gay and transgender lifestyles. The school have said that they are now going to withdraw the lessons on what they call their No Outsiders programme because of 600 kids being removed from the school last Friday by Muslim parents. Now, I find this not particularly shocking, not particularly troubling, but actually rather amusing because, of course, if you are one of those people from the liberal left, from the virtue signalling brigade, you're going to go, now, here's the problem. Should we side with the Muslim families who have come to this school in good faith, who have not sent their kids to an Islamic school, who have not sent their children to a place where they're going to all be in some way segregated between boys and girls, as some Islamic schools have told people that they want to do? Well, should we side with them because, you know, they are a minority in this particular scenario? Or should we side with the school and the LBGT community because they're trying to promote precisely what it is that the Muslim families don't want their children to learn about, right? The school is saying this. They said that they never intended to continue the No Outsiders lessons forever, but they just introduced them because they thought it was a good way of actually making it feel inclusive for everybody at the school. There's a guy called Andrew Moffat, right, who was awarded an MBE apparently for his work in equality education. He's been at this particular school for a while. He's already left another school because he had the same problem introducing gay and transgender communities into those schools. He says he was threatened and targeted via a leaflet campaign after the school piloted his No Outsiders programme. He admits that its ethos is to promote LGBT equality and challenge homophobia in primary schools. He actually runs an organisation which does challenge homophobia. He says that he is the author of Challenging Homophobia. He's also currently shortlisted for a World's Best Teacher Award, apparently because of the fact that he's so good at spreading all of these different communities around different various schools. However, the problem for an awful lot of the Muslim parents is that they said basically the lessons were inappropriate, that they should not have been taught to children that young. Here's one mother called Fatima Shah, who pulled her 10-year-old daughter out of the school, saying children were too young to be learning about same-sex marriages and LGBT rights in the classroom. Now listen to this quote and tell me me that it is completely and utterly reasonable, because I think it is. We are not a bunch of homophobic mothers, she says. We just feel that some of these lessons are inappropriate, some of the themes being discussed are very adult and complex, and the children are getting confused. They need to be allowed to be children rather than having to constantly think about equalities and rights. Shabana Mahmood, who's the MP for Birmingham Ladywood, spoke out as well, and she basically says the parents don't oppose sex and relationship education, but they feel that some of the children were too young for some of the things being taught. She said, none of my constituents is seeking particular or differential opt-outs at secondary school level. It is all about the age appropriateness of conversations with young children in the context of religious backgrounds. Now, that to me seems perfectly normal. Doesn't it seem perfectly normal to you? I mean, if I was a parent at that school, whether I was a Muslim or whether I was a Christian or whether I was an atheist or whether I was indeed a Catholic, I think we would all come to the same conclusion that if you're going to teach my children and I'm going to entrust my child to you between the ages of 4 and 11, I would like to think that your judgment would not be impaired. I would like to think that you would not be stupid enough to get into some politically correct bandwagon scenario where you're teaching kids about the kinds of things that they don't need to know about at the age of 4, at the age of 5, at the age of 6, or even at the age of 7. But I'd love to hear from some of you liberal lefties out there who want to promote this kind of stuff, because either you're going to have to take the side of the people who want to push the transgender and LGBT community debate onto 5-year-olds, or you're going to have to take the side of the Muslim parents. It's a sticky wicket, this, isn't it, really? Because I think we'd all agree that there is nothing wrong with teaching certain things in schools at certain ages, but I think from the age of 4, whether you're a Muslim parent or not, you're going to be slightly, probably uneasy about having sexual conversations with kids that young, aren't you?
Well, first of all, let me say that I've been talking in schools for nearly 40 years on a range of issues, including relationships and sex education. The message I get repeatedly from young people is they feel that relationship and sex education is not adequate, that it doesn't give them the information they need, particularly about the emotional side of relationships.
What sort of children, what sort of ages are you talking about here?
These are secondary school pupils.
Right.
But in this particular case, the school in question is a primary school, and the lessons that the parents object to have nothing to do with sex or sexual orientation whatsoever. There is no mention in these lessons about sex. It is purely about relationships and love. So the lessons talk about the fact that there'll be most kids will have a mum and a dad, but some parents will only be single parents. There'll be some kids who have extended families who perhaps live with aunts and uncles or grandparents, and there'll be some who live with same-sex parents.
It's an unusual school in the first instance, I have to say, Peter, because it is 99% Muslim. I don't think there's too many schools in Britain which would be 99% Muslim.
Well, this is true. And, of course, some of those young kids will later grow up to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender themselves. And they need to know that love, whether it's between a person of the opposite sex or the same sex, is love. And love is a good thing.
Yeah, but they don't need to know it when they're 4, Peter, do they?
Well, I think they do.
No, I don't think they do. No, I don't. Well, I'm a parent of 4 children, okay? I don't know how many kids you've got, but I would not want any child of mine at the age of 4 being taught anything like that.
Well, first of all, they're not being taught that at the age of 4, for a start. It's when they're a bit older in the primary school. And, of course, they're also taught in these lessons about the bodily changes they will experience.
They don't need to be taught that either at the age of 4 and 5. That's ridiculous, Peter. They need to be taught how to learn to do maths. They need to be taught how to learn to do English. They need to be taught about the world. They need to know where countries are. That's just fine until they start to get to an age when they can understand these kinds of conversations. And when they're 4 and 5, they can't. Simple.
Well, I told you, they're not being taught these things when they're 4, and I don't even think they're taught when they're 5. I think it's when they're 7 or 8. But, of course, young kids reach puberty now at around the age of 8 or 9, and they undergo bodily changes.
That's not true either. That is rubbish, Peter. Absolute rubbish. Not one of my children has reached the age of puberty until they've been at least 12 or 13. There are some children, unusual children, who may reach puberty under the age of 10, but very few.
Well, the research shows there are signs...
Well, never mind the research. I'm a parent. I'm telling you.
Well, it doesn't matter whether you're a parent.
Oh, it doesn't matter whether I'm a parent.
The research is there. It shows very clearly that a sizable minority of young people begin puberty around the ages of 8 or so.
A sizable minority now, not most.
And oh, sorry, if I said most, I take that back. I apologise. That was wrong. And of course, particularly for young girls, when they start to menstruate, that can be very frightening because they don't know and understand what that's about. So these lessons are all about trying to create a society where we understand others who are different from ourselves, where we accept that, where we don't bully them, we don't tease them. And we know that in schools where these lessons have been done, the levels of bullying of LGBT kids goes way down. And also those kids, when they realize that they're gay or lesbian, they understand it and they come to terms with it much more easily without going through terrible depression and anxiety.
Well, I still don't think that it's an appropriate. It's not appropriate for young primary school children, Peter, to talk about any kind of sex. It's not necessary.
I've told you the lessons do not talk about sex. The lessons do not talk about sex.
Well, I don't understand how you can teach. I don't understand how you can teach about a transgender or a homosexual or any kind of a partnership lifestyle without talking about sex.
You can say that it's possible that sometimes two men will love each other or two women. That sometimes people will feel that although they've been designated a boy, they feel that they're a girl or vice versa. That's got nothing to do with
Well, let me ask you a
sex
question.
at all.
Do you think that there is any combination of suggestions or any possibility that there's a connection between the numbers of young children who are being told this stuff and now the numbers of children who are saying they don't think that they are actually the gender they were born?
No, I think
You don't think so?
The feelings that people have when it comes to trans identity, it's deeply rooted, and it's always been there. Previously in the past, it's been suppressed and rejected. Now, thankfully, we're in a more understanding era where we hear what young people are saying. You know, we're always told we should listen to young people and hear their feelings and concerns and address them. And that is exactly what these lessons are trying to do.
Well, the parents don't agree, do they? So are you telling me the parents here are wrong, Peter?
But strictly within the framework of love and relationships, not about sex.
Well, let me ask you another question. Are these parents wrong, then, to have taken their children out of these wonderful, all-consuming, all-enveloping lessons?
Well, we live in a society where sexual orientation and gender identity is accepted as part of the fabric of our humane society. So it's very important that schools reflect that.
Well, it's not accepted by the parents of this school, obviously.
Well, I don't think there can be acceptance of prejudice. You know, Muslim parents would not like a school to be refusing to tackle Islamophobia because that's wrong.
Are you saying they're prejudiced?
We want Muslim people in this society to live in a free and open way where they're accepted, they're understood, they're not subjected to prejudice or discrimination. And that's exactly what these lessons are trying to do, but in relation to love and relationships. You're basically saying that these parents are prejudiced against LGBT communities. Is that what you're saying? I think they have unfounded fears. As you have promoted incorrectly, these lessons are not about sex. But of course
they are. Of course they are. You can say that till you're blue in the face, Peter. They are about sex. They are about sexual lifestyles.
They're about love and relationships
and sex.
And you keep on promoting this idea.
I'm not the one promoting anything, Peter. You're the one promoting it. I'm not promoting anything.
And the Muslim parents have unfortunately believed that these lessons are about sex when they're not about sex.
Well, maybe they know a bit more about it than you do. Maybe they know what their children are being taught.
I don't think they do know.
Really?
But I'm very glad that the school has now decided it's going to have one-to-one consultations with parents to explain what the lessons are about.
Don't you think they should have done that first?
It is clear, well, possibly they should have, but it's very clear that some of the parents who have been advised precisely what the lessons are about and have had explained to them have taken a different viewpoint. Now, that's only a very small number, I agree, but I hope that when these lessons are explained to the parents, they will realise that, you know, it may be possible that one of their own children will grow up to be lesbian and gay, and that they need to know that love is love, that love between two people is
Well,
a
that's got
good
nothing to
thing.
do with education, in my view. That is to do with parents. Parents should be teaching their kids about love because parents are the ones who should be having those conversations. Now, you'll no doubt say to me, well, not every parent knows how to do that. Well, and if you don't know how to talk to your children about love, then you shouldn't be having children.
Well, you're absolutely right. The research shows that the vast majority of well, no, not the vast majority, a significant majority of parents, I think nearly 60%, say they don't feel confident or capable of talking about these issues with their children. At the same time, over 90% of parents say the schools should teach these issues because they want to protect the health and welfare of their children.